So, hello to everybody who is watching us today, and we are going to dive straight right into asking Mr. Javed some questions relating to Pakistan's education crisis that is ongoing. A lot of times people get offended that we use the term crisis, but I think it paves a nice way to talk about the solutions or how things can be improved. And in this session specifically, we'd like to hear more about what the Malala Fund is doing to cater to the education problem. So, Davisa, my first question is that there are 22 million children out of school in Pakistan, and that's a number which is repeated across national and international platforms. And so, where do you think Pakistan's education system is headed? Are we doing enough to try to curtail that?
Thank you very much. I think that first of all, we need to unpack this 22 million figure because that's really important for us to really understand the magnitude of the problem, but also where it locates. I think that's really important. And in terms of the global figures and in terms of numbers available, we are the second country after Nigeria to host such a large number of outer school children. So I think that's something which we need to really mentioned. It's a crisis. It's really a crisis because any country which have such a huge number of children out of school need to really kind of arrest that. The second bit is there are large regional and gender disparities in these numbers. So I mean, if you look at where these children are, a study which we did in Punjab in 2014-15 with Nielsen, which is world's best data company, 5 or 6 rounds. We were able to see in Punjab alone the number of out-of-school children essentially were in 16 southern districts, right? So in most of them, in southern South Punjab, especially Kasur also had some, but most of the children were in South Punjab. But at the country level, if you look at the number of surveys done by multi-cluster poverty survey, others, there are roughly 40 bottom districts, and essentially these districts geographically are very close. So you have districts in southern Punjab, and then you have interior Sindh district closer to southern Punjab, and again then you have the Balochistan belt, Dera others, those districts, and then the fourth one is in Fata, Waziristan. I mean, that's also very close to that particular. There's a belt in the center of Pakistan where you have most of the children out of school, and especially if you're a girl living in a rural area in the age category of 10 to 16, most probably you'll be out of school. I'm saying most probably because in most of these districts, the net enrollment rate at matric class, ninth and 10th class is around 10%. I mean, you have these figures which are closer to C figures in sub-Saharan Africa, other countries. So I mean, that these kind of figures we are looking at. So it's very important to look at the access numbers and look at the drivers of this kind of very poor access. So of course there are problems of supply side, so there are not enough schools. We should be really thankful to low-cost private sector, which actually have enabled to open up a lot of these schools, these districts to kind of at least have it, because the public sector didn't really build so many schools. The second problem is if you have good schools in public sector, especially you have schools, then the quality is not very good. So therefore, they don't really attract so many children who they should attract. And we at Malala Fund, we are more interested in growing up girls in the age bracket of 10 to 16 or 18, because that's where, if you look at the education reform story in Pakistan, the last 20 years, most reforms are focused on the primary schooling, and I know that the problem is still very large there. But we also understood that our identity is basically girls' rights, and wanted to help them most where they kind of struggle most. So most of the girls were growing up in rural areas or in urban areas. They face a lot of problems, cultural problems, economic, harassment issues, other issues, so kind of even to access schools. And once they're in access, once they're in school, they're not really seen as leaders. I mean, they're seen as following a very traditional role. But our girls are great. Whenever they're given a chance, they really succeed and open doors for them and their families. So we want to champion that. We want to remove the barriers for girls to realize their full potential. And our programming is roughly around with the government, but with the not-for-profit sector as well, to help lift their education and their life chances.
That is beautiful work. And to my in my knowledge, I know that there's a problem of ghost schools, which is very prevalent. I know that specifically in Punjab, that is very common, and a lot of non-profits like Ahuatha are also trying to do their part, and TCF. So, what does the Malala Fund want to do specifically? Is it trying to just get girls into school? Is it trying to empower them to, start contributing to the economy? What is that vision?
So we are trying to kind of improve the important thing for us is that we want to use education as a transformational tool to change girls' life and their families' life, and which means that once they join the school, of course, we work outside the school as well to look at the challenges they're facing. So therefore, we do lobbying and research and lawmaking support and others to improve conditions where, for example, schools should have more money and then the government should allocate more money for the education sector. But the most important programming we're doing is in inside schooling through STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and art, which actually we call it STEAM education because we put just not the STEM but art also in it, make it STEAM. And we have an office inside the Ministry of Federal Education helping the ministry to design policies which could actually improve science education in girls, which actually would mean better science teachers, more lab usage, better rational thinking skills, art education. And the starting point, of course, which we start very recently, is to really look at the landscape and see how the teaching is ongoing and trying to come up with policy support which could actually allow head teachers to have more financial assistance from the government, equip the labs for girls. But later on, we have plans to also bring in private sector, corporations, media to A, start supporting these schools, but B, also starting rewarding quality head teachers and quality science teachers. And we have a very ambitious plan. There are 13,000 public sector schools in Pakistan across the country, and we want to reform the STEAM education in these high schools the next 5 to 7 years through policy support, through technical assistance, and through our sharing the best practices, through direct programming in schooling, but through making large coalitions of donors and private sector and civil society and other players like you and others to work together to change the landscape of science education in these schools. And by science education, I mean it's basically a way of looking at the school. I mean, it's actually not just meant to make every child forcefully accept science. It's basically to develop critical skills and leadership skills and open mind and rational thinking. And then whatever path they want to follow, we would just support them.
So how and when did the Malala Fund decide to expand its operations elsewhere? So there are a lot of countries in which it's operating right now. And so could you tell us a bit more about that and what that journey has been like?
So Malala Fund was founded, I mean, right after 2013-14, very beginning, and we have small programs everywhere in Pakistan. We had programming for the last 5 6 years. There's a $7 to $8 million investment we have done already in Pakistan across the country. We work through education champions. So we have 16 educational organizations and women rights organizations which work with us to come up with solutions which become pilot, and then later on we ask the government to kind of expand that. In some cases, we work at the policy level to write reports about education financing. In some cases, we work on digital contents for the variety of these areas. But I mean, really, since last year, when all of these efforts are picked up, the government of Pakistan have officially asked us to kind of work with them through and open the office and with history and kind of expand that in the public sector. So it's with this with the collective spirit of joint partnership with the government and the civil society and the donors, which we would be working with. But our approach is that we stay small, but long term. And we would work with the existing educational leaders and successful models, and we try to expand that. And we become more and more confident in coming months once we are more sure about our models, what is working, what is not. And we're very committed to transformation. We would never bring down the vision, and we don't want to make this program just a program which we could talk about on just on TV screens and Zoom calls. It should be a very real program, changing the lives of the girls and teachers inside schools. So we are committed to that.
And we see that, and we see and acknowledge the brilliant work that you have all been doing. I'd like to hear a little more, and I'm sure our audience would as well, about the challenges that have come your way. And I'm sure that there have been plenty which have, come out as specifically managing the programs and then also implementing them on the ground level. So could you tell us a bit more about some of those challenges and how you overcome them?
I mean, the challenge really is, especially this strategic challenge, which is that how a relatively small but influential player like us can be uh, can develop programs which actually work at school level. I was raised as a rural boy and studied in public sector, so I understand how public sector works. And I'm very committed that the program should be able to kind of work inside the landscape of public sector education. And I know that the advocacy only, that is great, and we have to do it because that's our primary tools. I have been working with the parliament before working with Malala Fund and others, but I also know that the implementation of laws and budgetary resources at the school level is problematic. I mean, we have lags in a kind of allocated resources to be fully committed first and released and implemented. So I mean, there's a major crisis in how the education sector should work at. So I think that's the first challenge. And the theory of change which we need to develop is therefore slightly ambitious. That I mean, we are advocating, but at the same time, we are trying to see and following the delivery chain inside the government that it actually is making inroads in the school landscape, and that's easily said than done because we are in the first year. And we still the building blocks of the program is still being developed right now as we speak. Discussions are ongoing, strategies are being developed. But the good point is that we rely on local partners who have history of working uh, with, with schools. For example, we work with our core partner in STEM education, Pakistan Alliance for Mathematics and Science, which is a legacy of Alif Elan campaign, which used to be Pakistan's first ever very large campaign. And we are working with Pakistan Youth Change Associate and Science Fuse, who actually use trying to kind of improve the science capital in teachers and head teachers, and then with the ministry, which is very helpful to kind of then work with us to kind of push these reforms and all. So and as we move forward, we also forge linkages with the private sector, but also with the provincial governments. And we will ask them to co-opt their own science education program with our programs. I think that's a big, in a way, policy and governance challenge. But the bigger challenge, Michelle, as you know, that we are very interested to prove the agency of girls in Pakistani education system and their role. We want to see them that society should come out of the religious or ethnic or other tribal kind of biases and bigotries, and see them in positive light, giving them a real chance to excel. And that's where it's important to have a societal conversation on how we want to treat our girls and boys, but especially girls because they face more challenge. And these challenges are across the caste and class and across the country. And therefore, it's important to have honest conversation that why we could never give a better deal to our girls, right? I mean, it's important that they should feel respected and safe, and they should be in a dignified environment in schools as well as in the workplaces. And it's really important to improve our gender indicators and overall human development condition, justice system. So I think that bit is also a bigger piece of thing, which not necessarily which we would be able to solve, but since we commit to kind of resolve and transform the education sector, and with the aim to improve girls' agency, we also want to work on the binding constraints with other partners and lawmakers to give a better deal to our girls.
And that is, I think, a challenge. Those are all challenges which require a lot of time and patience, these and that resilience and commitment to this cause, which I can see that Malala Fund team really has. So I'm curious to know, and I think so is our audience, that a lot of people, after hearing Malala Fund's name, they really want to be a part of it. They want to be a part of the cause. They want to, play their part in making the world a better place. So what advice would you give them, or what can they do? What can the just anybody from the civil society, any person, a student, or be it a fresh graduate, what can they do to help?
I think so it's a great question, and the first response is that it's absolutely important that all of us should stay together in solving these things. And I think the various ways to get involved will elaborate that more so that it actually will become a kind of a larger network of volunteers as well. I mean, if in their own right, you can become science ambassador and work inside the school. So we'll kind of come up with those programs also. But more formally, organizations they can apply to our annual grants, which we give them as per our own country strategy priorities, and we make them education champions, and they become part of the network, which then push the implementation of education policy. There's a separate fellowship program for girls called Girls Program. They can apply there, and if they are a change advocate, they can become part of the global network of the Girls Program. And they can, we also are starting a more listening girls program in which we would just hear the voices of girls and trying to kind of improve our own understanding of their issues, because we don't pretend that we have solutions to everything. We think that they are equally capable of informing us and informing the policymakers. And finally, alongside government in our STEAM program, which is more cross country, they can in their own respective schools start some kind of science club, or mathematics club, or art club, and work with their head teachers to make the change around the landscape. So I think, but we'll kind of have more elaborative kind of guidelines on that.
Absolutely, and I really hope that more girls and more just students overall are able to take an active part in these efforts, because I think that's something that is really lacking in our education system overall as well. That being more empathetic and active, just community service, if you would like to call it, maybe. One of my last questions to you is that collaboration is one part of making the education system, improving it overall. And the second bit is innovation. And we've seen lately that, edtech is something, and education technology is something that is on the rise. So we've seen a lot of startups come about. So what is your, kind of input on that? And is the Malala Fund doing anything to play a part in the edtech
Actually,
sphere?
actually, yes. I think we think technology offers a great kind of opportunity for us to improve our science education and our overall general education. And you'll be happy to know that during COVID, we supported organizations like Orenda Project at Talimabad, which developed digital contents, which later on Teleschool, which is the project of Government of Pakistan, they streamed to kind of, actually thousands and millions of girls, and we have registered a huge kind of uptake of that content, and that was supported by us later on. Talimabad won kind of global awards also on those contents. Other partners also supported them. They have this commitment to them. We also this year as well we made EdTech as one priority theme in which we'll have at least one more partner to kind of do that. And broadly speaking, I personally see that this is a real opportunity with this improvement in the internet connectivity and spread of the cell phones. We now have a real opportunity that the very kind of decades old pedagogy at school level can be replaced by actually very better digital contents developed by actually quality teachers. But the real challenge is that they should be working at the landscape of school so that the students don't have to choose two different systems. I mean, they should be inside the school in which, for example, they have their own classes in, for example, a physics class, and then followed up by maybe a 50 minutes of digital content class, and then they are able to kind of learn from that as well, and they kind of learn better. So I think those systems need to be made. I had meeting last week that in the ministry they're trying to come up with some kind of a system which could do that, and we would keep moving on that.
Absolutely, that sounds like a great plan, and I think that we'd be able to see it creating an impact in the next few years. So, and that is my last question to you as well. That where do you see Pakistan's education system overall in the next 5 years, and what effort or what role do you think or hope that Malala Fund will be playing in that revolution?
So, I mean, I actually said this last week as well somewhere, and I wrote that in my book that it's very important for us that we should be able to solve not every problem, but the fundamentally access and basic quality problem in 7 to 10 years. I mean, actually less than 10. And the reason I'm saying it, there are actually tested solutions like public-private partnership, which actually can dramatically increase the access to schooling in places like FATA or Kohistan or in Dera Bukti, other places where the government would take years to reach. The government should just fund Balochistan Education Foundation or Punjab Education Foundation or Sindh Education Foundation to expand, middle and high schools and kind of give them target to improve the, because it's important to bring in entrepreneurial spirit in enrolling and aligning the incentive of the private sector there. So once that access problem we should be able to fix, and my own wishful thinking is that probably our data collection system is underestimating the private sector reach. Probably if we could improve the data collection better, maybe we'll have a better handle on the out schools that maybe they're lesser than 22 million. So I think that's the second bit. The third bit is that if, for example, the public sector reforms now need to be school based and head teacher based, giving them financial powers, administrative powers, and allowing them to fix their schools and do innovation and take some pride in it. And if we do this, remove centralization, improve public-private partnership, make tech work at the school level, and give it a real push at the national level, starting conversation. I can tell you that we can actually transform the sector in 6 to 7 years. I'm saying that on the basis of some experience in Punjab education sector reform. I, along with my colleagues, led the effort to bring 2 million additional children in a school system of 54,000 schools. And I think it's just that kind of a big picture thinking and handle on implementation which should help us get there. Important thing which we can add as Malala Fund is to kind of being ambitious and being practical at the same. Ambitious in terms of targets and practical in terms of building on what works. And as my position, whatever power I have, I'm trying to push for those solutions, and I hope that leaders like you and fellows at Heads, they would also join hands to do that. And I also want to thank you for allowing me to be part of this thinking collective of yours, which actually want to do good in Pakistan and the world. And I think together we can make a great difference.
Thank you so much. And inshallah to that, I think it's very important to have that spirit of being an active citizen and really trying to be a change maker. I think everybody should be, irrespective of wherever they are working. And I am also hopeful, and we are hopeful, as Hatch, that we are able to achieve that for our collective society overall. So thank you so
Absolutely,
much.
absolutely. And when you are in Islamabad, visit our office or our team, and we can have more conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hello and welcome back to another one of our sessions for the Let's Hatch It Out series. Today we're going to be talking about a topic slightly different from our previous ones. We're going to be talking about the education system in Pakistan overall. And for that, we have with us the very Honorable Javed Ahmed Malik, who is Pakistan's program director for the Malala Fund. He brings with him 20 years of experience with demonstrated history of delivering large-scale social development programs, mainly in the education system, as well as social policy, rural development, and democratic programming and human rights. He's often worked with the system leaders in politics, policy, and the business cycle, including the Prime Minister, the President, the Chief Minister, and the Education Minister, along with several senior bureaucratic officers. He also possesses senior leadership experience of leading and managing large teams to deliver policy and projects while managing risks, donors' expectations, and representation. He is a very prominent figure in the education system in Pakistan, and we are thrilled to have him join us today and be a mentor as well as part of the Hatch Global Mentor Network. So thank you so much, Javed, for joining us.